This video is about a key piece of evidence in the Shakespeare authorship debate, the impossible doublet shown in the Droeshout engraving of the author on the title page of the First Folio. Please note that when I say Shakespeare, I mean the author, whoever he was, and when I say Shakspere or Mr. Shakspere, I mean the man from Stratford upon Avon. Whether the two are one and the same is what the issue is about. It has now been established that no evidence dating from the lifetime of Mr. William Shakespeare of Stratford shows that he was any sort of writer, much less that he was a great poet-playwright William Shakespeare. Even Professor Stanley Wells of the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust in Stratford upon Avon now admits that all of the evidence for him is posthumous. Yet he regards the evidence as incontrovertible. We dispute this. The most important evidence for William Shakespeare of Stratford as the author is located at the front of the First Folio collection of the plays, published in 1623, 7 years after he died. The front matter includes two brief allusions that together seem to suggest the author was from Stratford upon Avon. Ben Jonson's reference to him as the sweet swan of Avon, and Leonard Digges' reference to thy Stratford monument. The credibility of the First Folio is therefore crucial to Shakspere's claim. Anything about it that suggests those involved in its publication were equivocating in pointing to him as the author would be devastating. Shakespeare scholars have identified several anomalies in the folio that seem to undermine its credibility. One of the most important of these is found in the iconic image of the author on the title page of the folio, recognised all over the world and known as the Droeshout engraving, after engraver Martin Droeshout. Because this particular anomaly is so revealing, we decided to make a video about it to present it visually. Here we see an image of the title page of the First Folio with the engraving. The engraving is odd in several ways, as even orthodox scholars have noted. It has no neck, and the head is too big for the body, so it appears to be floating above it on the ruff. The hair is longer on one side than the other. The great bulbous forehead looks unnatural. The left and right sides of the doublet do not match up. Scholars blame the engraver, Martin Droeshout, but the publishers did not have to accept it and could have hired someone else for such an important project. The fact that they did not implies that they were satisfied. Here, in contrast, is a more typical portrait of a gentleman from the period, Sir John Peter, later Baron Peter. Notice that he is properly proportioned and his doublet looks natural and symmetrical. Here is a more typical frontispiece portrait of a writer, Samuel Daniel, prefaced to his Civil Wars, 1609. Again, the figure is well proportioned, and the clothing is natural and appropriate to a middle-class writer. Also note the complex ornamental design surrounding the image. This was the norm. The First Folio title page differs from all others of the period in showing no surrounding embellishments, only the stark image. Returning to the Droeshout portrait, at least one notable oddity was evidently quite deliberate. In 1911, a tailor published an article pointing out that the right side of the front of the doublet in the engraving is obviously the left side of the back. He wrote that it was not unnatural to assume it was intentional and done with express object and purpose. Since what is obvious to a tailor may not be obvious to others, let's examine the doublet and see if we can confirm his assessment. The doublet has 4 main oddities. First, notice that the 2 front panels have different shapes and sizes. The left front panel, to your right, curves down under the left sleeve, widening at the bottom, while the right front panel goes straight down toward the waist, narrowing sharply at the bottom, forming an upright wedge shape. The different shapes and sizes of the 2 panels are most apparent when comparing them at the bottom, where the left panel is much wider and larger than the right panel. But the left panel is also larger at the top, although the difference is smaller and less obvious because the top of the left panel is partially covered by the ruff. The difference is easily seen here, where the left embroidery edge, labelled Y, is clearly larger than the right embroidery edge, labelled X. These two panels should be similar in shape and size. Second, returning to the complete picture, notice that the two shoulder wings also have different shapes and sizes. The left shoulder wing is wider and longer, curling down beneath the left sleeve, while the right shoulder wing is noticeably narrower and stops before curling beneath the right sleeve. The two shoulder wings should appear to be mirror images of each other pictorially, taking perspective into account, but they are not. Third, notice that the embroidered stripes on the two sleeves do not match. The embroidered stripe on the left sleeve is much higher than the one on the right sleeve. This impression is confirmed by precise measurement of this detail. On the left sleeve, the upper edge of the embroidery, when extended, meets the inside edge of the shoulder wing, where it is joined to the doublet, a distance of just over 2 bands of embroidery, labelled B, down from the top of the shoulder wing. On the right sleeve, the upper edge of the embroidery meets the inside edge of the shoulder wing a distance of over 3 bands, plus a wide gap, labelled G, down from the top of the wing. Instead of an approximate match, the embroidery on the right sleeve is about twice as far down from the top as that on the left sleeve. Fourth, and most significantly, the patterns in the embroidery on the two shoulder wings do not match. Here, starting at the top of the left shoulder wing and moving down, there are 2 bands of embroidery close together, a gap, then another pair of bands, and so on. On the right, at the top there is only 1 band of embroidery, then a gap, then a pair of bands, etc. The pattern of embroidery on the left is BBG, BBG, BB, etc. And the pattern on the right is BG, BBG, BBG, etc. The 2 patterns would match on a normal garment, but here they do not. Clearly, this is not a normal garment. Moreover, the pattern in the embroidery on the right shoulder wing indicates that it is, in fact, the back of the left shoulder wing. This can easily be seen here. The pattern on the right shoulder wing is what one would see on the back of the left shoulder wing if the BBG pattern were repeated regularly around it. Returning to the complete picture, all 4 of the oddities described, the different shapes and sizes of the front panels, the different shapes and sizes of the shoulder wings, the non-matching embroidery stripes on the sleeves, and the non-matching embroidery patterns on the shoulder wings, are accounted for by the fact that the doublet in the engraving consists of the left front and the left rear of the same garment. The right front panel, for example, is the correct shape and size for the rear panel of the same doublet. This cannot be a mistake. We have now confirmed what the tailor said in 1911. The doublet consists of the left front and left back of the same garment, a sartorial absurdity. The engraving depicts the author with 2 left arms. Rather than amateurish and incompetent, it turns out to be a skillfully executed caricature. How is this to be explained? The mismatch between the embroidery patterns on the 2 shoulder wings can only have been deliberate. Any engraver, having completed one shoulder wing, would make sure the second wing matched the first, unless instructed otherwise. Combined with the other oddities, this particular feature shows beyond doubt that the doublet was carefully designed to consist of the left half of the front and the left half of the back of a real garment. It would appear that Droeshout had a real doublet in front of him, and, having depicted the front left half with the central fastenings and embroidery, he turned it around and drew the back left half. No engraver could ever commit such a gross error unless it was expressly required. The so-called oddities were evidently intentional and required by the publishers. A young man like Droeshout, undertaking an important commission early in his career, is going to make absolutely certain that the finished product is exactly what his employers require. That he signed the engraving with his full name suggests that he was fully satisfied with his achievement. Among its many peculiarities, the engraving is extremely large, about 4 times the area of the title page portrait of any other author of the period. Why? Perhaps because if the image had been of normal size, the details of the embroidery would have been so small that the message they were designed to convey might have been missed. To ensure that the left front, left back character would be noticed, the engraving had to be large, and so no space was left for the usual allegorical figures and emblems surrounding such images. Further evidence of the duplicity of the engraving is provided by the starched collar. Its support shows clearly through the linen on the left side of the collar, but is not visible on the right side. In addition, the triangular sewn darts on the collar are clearly asymmetrical. This detail points out both of these anomalies. It is no more a real collar than the doublet is a real doublet, and it is difficult to avoid the conclusion that the person depicted is being mocked and ridiculed. Although 1 or 2 peculiarities might be ascribed to carelessness, 6 or 7, some obvious at first glance, seem to suggest a deliberate agenda of some kind. Returning to the main picture. Once one understands the Droeshout engraving, it is difficult to see it the same way. Once pointed out, the oddities seem obvious, and once they are explained, the solution is readily apparent. Now ask yourself why, if you are able to understand the impossible doublet, Stratfordian scholars cannot. By clothing the figure in a ridiculous and nonsensical garment, the publishers were most likely indicating that the person ostensibly depicted, Shakspere of Stratford, was not the true author of the plays that follow. This is consistent with several other oddities about the First Folio that also call its credibility into question. The Droeshout engraving seems deliberately designed to alert observant readers, right on the title page, to be sceptical about taking everything that follows at face value, and to keep an eye out for other anomalies. For additional information on reasons to doubt that the Stratford man was the author of the works, visit the website of the Shakespeare Authorship Coalition at doubtaboutwill.org. That's doubtaboutwill.org.